Good afternoon, members of the media and the wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much for your time here this afternoon for this attendance at this media conference out of the Office of the Attorney General. You all would recall that in July, on the 7th of July of this year, I held a media conference at the Office of the Attorney General to tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago about certain work that had taken place along with the Office of the Attorney General and an international and local team of best-in-class forensic auditors, lawyers, and investigators. You recall on that occasion I spoke about 3 matters being filed in the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago in the fight against white-collar corruption by this government. Those matters, 2 of which were related to the live sport program under the former administration, one being a claim filed against the former directors who presided over the live sport program at the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago, and the other claim being against a company called eBeam, which is owned by Mr. Adolphus Daniel. The 3rd claim I spoke about on that occasion was a claim related to the purchase of certain lands by the HDC in 2012 called the Eden Gardens land, where this government's claim and HDC's claim is that those lands were valued at between $50 to $60 million, but purchased by the HDC in 2012 for approximately $175 million. You would recall on that occasion that I informed the nation that the work that had been done along with these international forensic auditors and investigators and lawyers, we had managed to follow the money, and we had found what appeared to be the payment of a $50,000 bribe to a public officer by the persons who sold the land at $175 million to the HDC. Now, this work has continued, and as I had indicated on that occasion, the Office of the Attorney General has been working with this best-in-class team, and I'm here today to tell you all, the nation, about some further work that has been recently filed in the High Courts, as recently as last week, Thursday. You all would recall the Estate Management Business Development Company, EMBD, and certain allegations being made with respect to EMBD and about $400 million just before the 2015 general election. The Office of the Attorney General has been working along with EMBD, and we've been conducting with this international team investigations, we've been following the money, and we've also been doing a certain level of forensic work, which has come to fruition. There are 5 contractors who we have found were hand-picked by the former administration through EMBD in July to September 2015, and granted contracts and paid sums of money during that very short period of time. And actually just before the general election of September 2015, they were paid over $200 million. These 5 contractors who were handpicked, and I say they were handpicked because at the time, according to EMBD's tender documents and tender rules, there were over 35 contractors who were qualified to do the work that was granted and awarded. But only 5 contractors, 6 were invited, and 5 contractors shared these 10 contracts and awarded these 10 contracts for Carney Traces roads and the development of some HDC plots in central Trinidad and Tobago. These 5 contractors are Taradath Ramnauth and Company Limited, Mootilal, Ramhit and Sons Contracting Limited, Kall Company Limited, Namalco Construction Services Limited, and Fides Limited. These 5 contractors were handpicked and awarded contracts which we have investigated, and we have come to certain conclusions leading to the commencement of action in the High Courts of Trinidad and Tobago. Now might be an opportune time to just remind that the government of the day can only pursue of its own volition civil actions in the courts of Trinidad and Tobago. Any criminal action that is being pursued has to be as a result of police, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service investigations, and comes under the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, who constitutionally is protected from the executive. So what we had given a commitment to in 2015 to pursue white-collar crime and corruption, that work has continued, and I am about to tell you all the fruit of some of the work that has resulted as a result of the work that was done. So there were these 5 contractors: T.N. Ramnauth and Company Limited, Mootilal, Ramhit and Sons Contracting Limited, Kall Company Limited, Namalco Construction Services Limited, and Fides Limited, who awarded 10 contracts actually executed in the month of August 2015, less than a month before the general elections of 2015. In fact, one of these companies, Namalco, actually sued the EMBD in May 2016 for over $1 billion. So Namalco brought a claim against EMBD, that is against the state, for approximately $1.3 billion in May 2016. And the Office of the Attorney General, working very closely with EMBD, has resisted and fought and defended that claim whilst conducting forensic investigations and forensic work and coming to certain evidentiary conclusions. I can tell you all that today in the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago, this Namalco claim against EMBD was stayed on an application by EMBD for it to be joined with what I'm going to call cartel claims, and I'm going to tell you now about the cartel evidence that we uncovered. Also, T.N. Ramnauth, 3 other contractors out of the 5 filed claims against EMBD. T.N. Ramnauth filed its claim on the 24th of April 2017. Kall filed its claim on the 1st of May 2017. And Ramhit filed its claim on the 11th of May 2017. And interestingly, all 3 of those contractors used the exact same attorneys. And as I get into the claim that the state is now pursuing against these 5 contractors and other public officials, you will see that our claim is one of cartel behavior and conspiracy taking place between these contractors and bid rigging for them to decide who should take what contract and who should get paid what. So interestingly, 3 of those contractors are now currently represented by the exact same attorneys at law. Last week, Thursday, in the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and you all would recall last week, Thursday was a very interesting day, but unbeknownst to those who were sitting in Parliament at the time and completely unconnected, the state, through EMBD, filed 3 claims, 1 against T.N. Ramnauth, 1 against Kall, and it also filed proceedings against Namalco to stay their $1.3 billion claim in order to bring them into these cartel claims. The state has filed claims against them, and right now we have just filed in the High Court today, I've just gotten word, a claim against Ramhit along similar lines, and we intend to file a claim against Fides, who's the 5th contractor, in very short order. We have claimed against them knowing receipt and dishonest assistance, unlawful means conspiracy, damages and equitable compensation, and civil law bribery. The state's claim is that between November 2014 and September 2015, these 5 contractors, with the intention of enriching themselves and injuring the state and EMBD, knowingly procured and obtained contracts, certifications, and payments by reason of collusion between themselves, and that was designed to ensure that specific companies, by wrongful and unlawful agreement, were awarded these contracts. What we have found evidence of are that these 5 contractors colluded together. For the first time in Trinidad and Tobago, the type of analysis that was done was an analysis done of every single tender document and the bills of quantities and a comparison between every single one. And what we found is clear evidence of bid rigging between these 5 contractors, and it appears decisions amongst them as to who should take which contract. And I will give you some of the information as to why we say that happened and the evidence that exists to support it. We have promised to pursue white-collar crime and corruption, no matter what level and how high or how low it goes. And what I'm about to tell you all is very disturbing evidence that we uncovered as a result of our forensic work with respect to these investigations. We are also going to be commencing action, because we have sufficient evidence as a result of our investigations, against the following public officials. Dr. Roodal Moonilal, who at the material time was the Minister of Housing and Urban Development and the line Minister for EMBD. Mr. Gary Parmassar, who at the material time was acting first and then made the permanent Chief Executive Officer of EMBD, and a Mr. Mahadio Balru, who at the time was the Divisional Manager of Projects at EMBD. The evidence that we have uncovered includes, but is not limited to, a series of text messages being exchanged between Mr. Parmassar as the CEO, first the acting CEO and then the confirmed CEO, Dr. Roodal Moonilal, T.N. Ramnauth, Naeem Ali from Namalco, and one of the principals of Kall. These text messages are very, very damning and damaging, and even contain evidence of the then former minister, Dr. Roodal Moonilal, instructing who contracts should be awarded to, how much money should be paid to these contractors, and on occasions he has even indicated to Mr. Parmassar and others to bring the checks made payable to the contractors to him, Roodal Moonilal. This has been uncovered as a result of forensic work that was done and the recovery of text messages and other types of messages. The state's case is that there was a cartel that was taking place amongst these 5 contractors and these public officials, and that they decided who should be invited to participate in the tendering for these contracts. And then what we've also found is that the work that they claim was done and that they have been paid for doing was not performed. We have, over a period of 18 months, done serious analysis of the various work sites and have found that work was either not done or the quality of the work was such a low quality, the value of the work should not have been certified. Those other public officers that I have referred to at EMBD assisted in the payment by just certifying payment without checking to see whether the work was done. So as soon as claims were put in for work and we found that those claims were overclaimed and over-certified, payments were made. Therefore, practical completion certificates and completion of contract certificates were issued, purporting to verify that work had been undertaken or completed satisfactorily in circumstances where we have found they were not done. And we found that indeed the works carried out are worthless on occasion and of no value. The defects and failures to comply with specifications identified are irremediable, and the roads are not fit for intended purposes. Inflated payments were made and authorized by these officers of EMBD, and EMBD contractors made applications for certifications and payments which were certified almost simultaneously, which anyone who has any experience in construction would know is very highly unlikely. The respective engineers appointed under each of these contracts certified payments for the work without verifying whether the works had been carried out or contained any defects. The participation of Dr. Roodal Moonilal and Mr. Parmassar in the cartel arrangements and their inappropriate favoring of claimants, as has been pleaded by the state, was a breach of their fiduciary duties. As a government minister, Dr. Roodal Moonilal owed the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in law and pursuant to his oaths of office in the first schedule of the Constitution a duty to act honestly and in good faith with a view to and in the best interest of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And we claim that he has breached that duty by his participation in these cartel arrangements. Fellow citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, once again, for the first time, what we have had here is a very meticulous, careful, quiet, and efficient level of work that has been pursued out of the Office of the Attorney General. And this work has borne fruit because we have managed to uncover some very disturbing trends that have now been culminated in evidence. We have been utilizing over the last 18 to 20 months, as I say, a best-in-class international team of auditors, investigators, and lawyers, along with local counsel, which has culminated in these claims being filed. We expect to file claims against Dr. Moonilal and these other public officials within a very short period of time, and we will prosecute them in the civil courts to the best of our ability and with the best resources put behind it, because the story that is being told is a very, very disturbing one. What we also found is a number of emails being sent by contractors to the persons at EMBD. So email has been sent, for example, from Naeem Ali at Namalco to the EMBD officers, giving the EMBD officers draft cabinet notes and telling them to pursue these through the normal channels. So obviously the question becomes, what is a contractor doing sending a draft cabinet note to a public officer and telling him to push it through this system in order for the contractor to be awarded contracts? The claims run about 70 pages, so they're very, very detailed. And I must say that in my 18 years of practice, this is the best work I've ever seen done. And they really we have left no stone unturned, and it is all backed by sufficient evidence. It was also interesting that the invitations to tender for these 10 projects actually went out on the 11th of June 2015. And you all may recall that the general elections were called on the 12th of June 2015. Another very disturbing fact that came to light was that on the 30th of July 2015, the First Citizens Bank offered EMBD a financing facility of $400 million. And this facility was clearly stated to pay outstanding balances owed to contractors. The board of directors of EMBD then met on the 3rd of August 2015, and the management persuaded the board that they should enter into this $400 million financing arrangement to pay contractors who were owed money. At that stage, in August 2015, the 3rd of August 2015, infrastructure works on 23 residential sites were outstanding, and the board was told by the management that contractors were owed $900 million. So in August 2015, you had the management of EMBD saying contractors were owed $900 million, and there were shortfalls, and they needed to borrow $400 million in order to make these payments. What we then found by tracing the EMBD payments is over $200 million of this $400 million that was supposed to be for back payment of contractors was actually divided amongst these 10 contractors. And those 10 contractors, in the space, a very short space of time of less than 2 months, were paid over $200 million for work that on occasion was not carried out, was insufficient, was below standard, and on some occasions not done at all, as I said. For the first time, we're pursuing a claim for cartel arrangements and for conspiracy amongst persons to defraud the state and EMBD. And what we're relying on is the participation by these 5 contractors, along with Mr. Parmassar, Mr. Balrup, and Dr. Roodal Moonilal, who breached their fiduciary duties. And what we say is that they enriched themselves, that is, enriched the contractors, and caused injury to EMBD by the following in summary. Pre-tender estimates prepared by EMBD's engineers were inflated. Quantities were overstated in the bills of quantity. The EMBD contractors had advance sight of the revised, inflated pre-tender estimates. We have found evidence that these 5 contractors had advance sight and knowledge of the pre-tender estimates, the internal pre-tender estimates. The EMBD contractors colluded to agree which of them would win each of these contracts. The pre-selected winners used the revised, inflated pre-tender estimates to ensure that their final winning prices were very close to the estimated figures. So, of course, the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, if something should charge $10, should cost $10, these pre-tender estimates had them at $15, and then the contractors got them at $15. And what we found when we did an analysis of all the various contractor tenders is they were manipulating certain parts of their tender and certain estimates across the board. So if they were offering something for $5 in this contract, and they won it at $5 for the same exact item, they were then inflating it to $20 in the other contracts and $40, etc. So it shows a consistent trend. And every occasion when they won the contract, they were back down to the accepted price. The pre-selected losers adjusted the prices in the relevant bills of quantities to ensure that those bids were successful, which I was just explaining. There was no competitive bidding for these contracts, and contracts were awarded at inflated prices. Works were claimed and invoiced by these contractors and were purportedly certified by the defendant, that is EMBD, and payments were made to the contractors without appropriate inspection or review, with the consequence that payments were made for defective and omitted works and for inflated quantities. And unfortunately, we also found that EMBD did not have proper contemporaneous records for these works. You would expect in these types of works to find at EMBD, someone has gone out in the field, someone has certified that the work being claimed to have been done has been done, etc. That quite simply did not exist. And in some cases, payments were made within 24 hours of a claim for payment being submitted. The $400 million financing facility obtained to pay the EMBD contractors for these Carney Road works was made by a false representation to the board of directors that I just explained. There is sufficient evidence, as I've said, and I'm not going to get into it because this really now is for the courts to decide, to support these claims of cartel behavior and the conspiracy and bid rigging claims that are being made. I'd just like the opportunity to just point out one of the most blatant examples of how they conducted their bid rigging and their collusion and their conspiracy to defraud EMBD. A striking example of collusion is the cost of thermoplastic road painting paint, road marking paint. At the material time, the market price of line painting was between $32 a meter and $45 a meter. These contractors were in or close to that range on their winning bids. So for their winning bids, they would come in between the $32 a meter and the $45 a meter. Now this is the paint, people, that we use to paint the roads. So paint is paint, painting a road is painting a road, no matter if it's like this, it's like that, it's bending a corner, etc. So the argument that people might make that, well, the different terrain, it means different materials used, simply does not apply to paint that you use to paint a road. So on the winning bids, the contractors that won the bid would come in between $32 a meter and $45 a meter. However, on their losing bids, they were between $440 to $800 a meter. That was by a company called LCB, who participated in this bid rigging but won none. Namalco, on their losing bids, put $350 to $500 a meter. So Namalco, on the bids that they lost, bid at $350 to $500 a meter, but on the bids they won, bid at $32 a meter to $45 a meter. Ramhit did it on their losing bids at between $295 a meter to $500 a meter, and TN Ramnauth did it at $400 to $500 a meter. So what I've just identified there came about as an analysis of every single line item of the tenders. So in the tenders that the various contractors won, they were within the range. For the exact same paint and line painting of a road, on the bids that they lost, they put their inflated cost on the line painting. There is no explanation that can be provided for that type of behavior. What we also found is the total price for the 10 contracts when we did a proper estimate for these 10 contracts, how much it should have cost the taxpayers, utilizing proper market rates without any inflated prices, etc. It should have cost the taxpayers $248 million, as opposed to the 10 contracts that were awarded in the sum of $416 million. So they awarded themselves contracts to the value of $416 million for work that was really only valued and should have only been contracted for $248 million, which is an overinflation of over 68%. The text messages. What we found is that Mr. Ramnauth, Taradath Ramnauth, was text messaging Mr. Gary Parmassar. Mr. Gary Parmassar was the acting CEO of EMBD, and he wanted a house. So we found him asking Mr. Ramnauth, who has absolutely nothing to do with HDC whatsoever, for an HDC house. And then text messages from Mr. Ramnauth back to Mr. Parmassar saying he would arrange same with the boss, the former minister, Dr. Roodal Moonilal. We then have also found text messages exchanged between Mr. Parmassar and Mr. Moonilal about the granting of that HDC house. Dr. Moonilal telling him, don't come to the key giving ceremony, you'll get the key afterwards, privately. For him, Mr. Parmassar choosing which is the house that he wanted. And strangely, Mr. Ramnauth telling him, look, we will sort you out with this house. If you don't get an HDC house, we'll also arrange a house for you in Valsayn or somewhere else, once you facilitate the awards of these contracts. I'll just refer to a couple of what are damning text message exchanges. On the 2nd of September, 5 days before the general elections of the 7th of September, we have a text message from Mr. Ramnauth to Mr. Parmassar stating as follows, and I quote, "How are you, the boss? How are you? The boss asked me to send you this. Junior 20, Naim 20, TN 26, Prem 15, Calco 15, Shane 4, totaling $100 million. So this is a text message from Mr. Ramnauth to Mr. Parmassar saying that the boss asked him to ensure that the following payments were made. Junior 20, Naim 20, TN 26, Prem 15, Calco 15, Shane 4, totaling $100 million. And unfortunately for us, the citizens and the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, over $100 million were paid out a few days before the general election in that order and to those persons named. On the 18th of December 2014, the following exchanges took place between Dr. Roodal Moonilal and Mr. Parmassar. Mr. Parmassar, document for Ramhit being prepared. Problems with Calco as its variations not approved. Chairman told me I'm not to make any payment to him. Chair also told me to tell you he's instructing me not to pay. Dr. Roodal Moonilal responds to Calco. Mr. Parmassar says, yes, to Calco. Dr. Moonilal, K, what about Ramhit? Now these are the SMS messages to the phone numbers registered to these persons. Mr. Parmassar was using a company telephone that he had to return to the company when he was sent on suspension when suspicions arose. And that is the forensic analysis and work done on that phone that then picked up these messages being sent to these various persons' telephone numbers. Dr. Moonilal goes on, Mr. Parmassar says, Dr. Moonilal says, what about Ramhit? Mr. Parmassar says, payment will be ready in the morning. It went for one signature, an engineer giving me certificate also. Danielle has checked, but she wants to see the certificate first. Dr. Moonilal, good. Dr. Moonilal, send a check for me to give to Ramhit tomorrow. Mr. Parmassar responds, he will do so. On the 3rd of January 2015, exchanges between Dr. Moonilal and Mr. Parmassar. Dr. Moonilal, need to pay Calco some money. Mr. Parmassar, okay, Chief, I think we can do 4 million. Dr. Moonilal, that is safe? Dr. Moonilal, give me the check on Monday. Dr. Moonilal, prepare the check. Mr. Parmassar, will have to confirm, but I know he submitted invoice for that amount. On the 5th of January 2015, another exchange between Dr. Moonilal and Mr. Parmassar. Dr. Moonilal, sandpit in Milton, Coover. You know about that? Mr. Parmassar, it's a new sand hit we are exploring, the idea of opening. Dr. Moonilal, want to lease it to Ramhit and Calco. Parmassar, understood, but we're now making application, so it's still some time off, but I will accelerate. Dr. Moonilal, fast forward. On the 21st of January 2015, from Mr. Parmassar to Dr. Moonilal, Chief, good night. As you see, I don't really ask for much, but I'm asking for assistance in obtaining a single unit family home in Egypt. Asgar has all my information, but I will also any assistance will be greatly appreciated. Dr. Moonilal replied on the 21st of January, you want a house? 2015, you want a house? To which Mr. Parmassar replied, yes. And we have forensically traced that, and he was in fact given an HDC house subsequently. On the 5th of March 2015, Dr. Moonilal, the Minister of Housing and Urban Development, sent an SMS message to Mr. Parmassar stating, quote, also prepare note for roads, liaise with Naeem. Of course, we suspect that Naeem is Naeem Ali, the principal of Namalco. On the 13th of March 2015, messages between Dr. Moonilal and Mr. Parmassar. Dr. Moonilal, need small payment for Mainway and LCB. Mr. Parmassar, no, Dr. Moonilal, tell me how much before. Mr. Parmassar, okay, we'll prepare. Mr. Parmassar, I can make a payment of $5 million each. Dr. Moonilal, yes, prepare a check and send to me. The question arises I've just mentioned a few of these SMS and text message exchanges. The question consistently arises, why is a government minister asking for checks to be prepared and then be brought to him, where the contractors are the persons to whom these checks are payable? On the 17th of March 2015, the following exchange took place between Mr. Parmassar and Dr. Moonilal. Mr. Parmassar, minor works in Picton free to tender and semi-major works in Hermitage to do tendering. Dr. Moonilal, invite Calco and Fides for Hermitage and Picton. We then have text messages from a principal at Calco to Mr. Parmassar, reminder on payment today. Okay, I was calling you to pick up the check. Quite simply, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in Trinidad and Tobago, this type of forensic work and investigation has been done and carried out under the Office of the Attorney General, working very closely with EMBD personnel and their documents. We have gathered evidence which have now been put into High Court claims. As I said, we are going to be pursuing claims against these 5 contractors and those 3 public officials, including Dr. Roodal Moonilal and Mr. Parmassar, the former CEO of EMBD. The type of behavior that we've seen is quite shocking. And on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, We are claiming that these contracts are void and should be void or otherwise non-existent as a matter of agency law. They're unenforceable as a result of the doctrine of illegality. We're seeking to rescind these contracts and recover the full amounts of money paid to these various contractors. We are also pursuing claims of knowing receipt and dishonest assistance against these persons, and we're claiming that bribes and offers of bribes were made to Mr. Parmassar by Mr. Ramnauth in the offering of a house and other incentives. We are also claiming that there's an unlawful means conspiracy between these parties, and they unlawfully conspired to defraud EMBD and by extension the state. And we will be pursuing them all for damages. It was also very interesting when we analyzed these 10 contracts that all of the contracts were awarded on either the 19th of August or the 25th of August 2015. So contracts being awarded on the 19th of August, a mere couple weeks before the general election, and payments to the tune of over $200 million being provided to these contractors. What work could have possibly gone on in that period, and what quality of work is what we are challenging. Members of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, this is yet another culmination of the work being done out of the Office of the Attorney General in this government's fight and commitment to fight white-collar crime in Trinidad and Tobago. The government is fully committed to the fight against corruption, and regardless of whom the perpetrator or perpetrators are, we will prosecute these matters in the court on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And this meticulous approach to holding people accountable for white-collar crime and to protect the public purse and interests of Trinidad and Tobago has never been done before in Trinidad and Tobago. I might add that we are also pursuing, and we have filed proceedings in both New York and Miami with respect to some of these contractors. This government is committed to following the money. This government is committed to taking the fight against corruption to those who held office, who may hold office, and who have defrauded the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And this matter is now squarely before the courts of Trinidad and Tobago. We saw it fit to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago today, this is some of the work that the government has been doing out of the Office of the Attorney General. Have faith, it is now with the court system in Trinidad and Tobago and will be pursued there in Trinidad and Tobago. As and when there's anything further for us to inform the public of Trinidad and Tobago on with respect to these matters, we shall do so. I thank you all very much for your time, and I'll take a couple questions.
What sort of total sum would be involved if you had to estimate? Okay, yeah, we got different figures that you gave, but what total sum might be involved if you had to estimate?
Total sum with respect to what? These 10 contracts? We know that the total sum paid out was about $203 million in that very short space of time.
But
I'm going after the full amount.
Cartel law that you mentioned, I know that's a big thing in US law, that they trust and cartel and so on, but what law is it, would it be under in Trinidad and Tobago?
Same law. What we're claiming is there's a conspiracy and there was cartel type behavior taking place. When I say we've found the best in class, I actually personally went to a lot of places to find those who have done these types of cases successfully before. And of course, I would look at Commonwealth jurisdictions. So if you actually do a search, you'll see in Turks and Caicos, which is a similar legal jurisdiction to us, government ministers, former government ministers, and persons and contractors were successfully prosecuted and claims brought against them for recovery of civil assets. Those are the best in class people I'm working with.
The contractors had a same lawyer, the same law firm?
Those are the claims that have been brought now in the High Court against EMBD. And I just find it a little bit strange, and I don't really believe in too much coincidence in life, that 3 out of the 5 contractors who are being accused of cartel behavior, conspiring, colluding together, utilize the same exact lawyers now to bring claims against EMBD.
You feel comfortable to say that? Okay.
No. And I'd just like to use this opportunity to point out some of the behavior we've seen within the past couple of days. This action has been worked on for the last 18 months, and this is the culmination of that work. The soonest we could have filed it, because of course their defenses and counterclaims, was on Thursday of last week. Again, I repeat, I don't believe in coincidence that on Thursday of last week, certain attacks were made on the Attorney General, who of course is the head of the Office of the Attorney General in the Parliament. I don't believe in coincidence. This work is a culmination of very meticulous, careful, forensic work, and this is not speculative.
Mr. Young, just to delve into some of the statements you made, you said some of the works that were carried out are, in essence, worthless.
Correct.
Can you give us an example, maybe a project, and how do you deem it worthless in a case like this?
I don't want to get into the exact specifics and particulars, but I can give you some examples. For example, if the contract would have said, because what these really were paving traces. So if the contract really said that you should have delivered 20 millimeters of road, we found that 2 millimeters were delivered. We found that if drains, etc., should have been built and actually were charged and paid for, they don't exist. But with the worthlet, and what we also found with some of these contractors is you were supposed to have samples done and tested by labs. And we found that 2 or 3 of the contractors, when they provided their samples and said they were tested by independent labs, they were actually tested by subsidiary or sister companies of the contractors.
One of the companies named here, Kall, is currently doing work for the government in that it was just awarded the Manzanillo project. Does that mean then that this will affect that project in any way, considering the kind of action that the government is going after?
This work has been kept very quiet and very much under wraps, as you can understand, because of the type of work that had to be done and how carefully it needed to be done. Now that it has come to light, it is something we will be looking at. But certainly, what we can immediately say with the award of that contract, what you've heard me describe here today is bid rigging, collusion for overinflated awards of contracts. This government feels certain, because it scrutinized very carefully the work done by NIDCO in the award of that contract, that none of that took place and went on with respect to the award of that contract. What the government's duty is to protect the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago and to ensure that we as taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago don't pay overinflated prices. What we pay for, we get value for money, etc. What I've just described to you is not an example of that type of behavior. So when it comes to the award of those contracts under this government, we will be very closely scrutinizing the procurement and tender processes.
You mentioned earlier about some of the companies, some of the contractors who would have had winning bids of 30 million and for the losing bids, 400 million. Just for clarity, were these the same projects or different projects?
Sorry, you mean the tenders that they would have put in? Mm. Yes, it is. This was the work that was done here is an analysis of 10 contracts that took place right before the general elections. So what we found is that those 10 contracts, only 5 contractors that I called, plus 1, were invited to tender. And then it is only 5 contractors who got those 10 contracts shared amongst themselves. And when you do an analysis of the various tenders that they put in, and I use the best analysis for me is the painting. Paint is paint. And the painting price that they charge in the bids that they won were between $32 and $42. And in the same bids and in other bids that they lost for the exact same paint, they inflated their price in their tender document to $300, $400, $500. What is the explanation for that? It's the same paint. Anybody else? I have to get to Parliament.
Towards the end of your statement, you said, why is a government minister asking for checks to give to contractors? Do you have an answer to that question? What do you speculate?
I think the court, one thing I don't do is delve in the realm of speculation. I never speculate. So whenever I come with something, it's because it's backed up by facts and evidence. And I think that is a question that will be asked in the courts of justice. But I can't answer for Dr. Moonilal.
I mean, this company has had a troubled history, and I think it's defined as a special purpose state company. But is there a need legislatively to look again at the laws or the lack of laws that govern these special purpose state companies, and also the procurement law reform? What's the status of that, please?
Well, as you all would have heard us say, both at the spotlight as well as in the national budget debate, the procurement legislation, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act, is currently awaiting proclamation. What we're waiting on is the Office of the President to select a procurement regulator who will then head the body. I personally look forward to the proclamation of that law, because that law allows, for the first time, for bid rigging to be a criminal offense, an express statutory criminal offense.
Is there any anything found in the investigations that were conducted by the Office of the Attorney General that requires some being forwarded to other authorities, for example, the police, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and so on?
The work and the evidence that we uncovered has been forwarded to the Police Service of Trinidad and Tobago. Okay? Yeah. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate you. Add one more, Ian.
All these pronouncements that before the trial, well, as we are getting it right now, you are not concerned about it would end up like the live sport, and that it would be thrown out with all the publicity that this is getting right now?
No. These are civil actions. I've just come to tell the population the work that the government has been doing, and the result of that work has led to claims being filed against contractors. This is not a trial. This is not the court of public influence, etc. And these are civil matters. Correct. Well, now we filed against, last week, Thursday, we filed against T.N. Ramnauth and Mr. Ramnauth personally because of the type of text messages that he was exchanging. We filed against Kall. Today, before coming down here, we have filed against Ramhit. We filed an application to stay the Namalco $1.3 billion, which was granted in court this morning. So we intend to file similar proceedings against Namalco. And then we will also be commencing proceedings against Fides, Dr. Moonilal, Mr. Parmassar, and I think Mr. Balru. I am hoping very shortly. Okay? Thank you all very much.